Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I am Jason Powell, and this is Coach's Spot, where we're just going to go over coaching systems, coaching, everything. But today's guest is Will Smith, not the one you're thinking of. It's a different one. Uh, we've never had that before.
Yeah, right.
Will and I have known each other how many years?
Oh man, it's 2025.
Yeah, it's got to be a long time.
Yeah.
But
12 to count.
Yep. Quick story. We were at a party when we were 21 and we're standing in the front yard and we both have a beer in our hand and a cop walks up and we're the only two in the front yard. And he asks if we're of age. And we told him, yeah, of course we are. And he goes, well, can I see some ID? And neither one of us had ID. And he goes, well, what's your name? And Will goes, Will Smith. And he looks at me and he goes, what's your name? I said, DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Still works today.
It still works today. People still think that's funny. But today we're going to kind of go over, I think, the difference in culture for coaching youth athletes in the Texas area. Like just how different the culture is. Because I grew up in a much different culture than you.
Right.
Because I grew up in Illinois and Minnesota, which for wrestling was top of the game.
Right.
But for every other sport, even though Chicago and Washington, D.C. have the most NFL players, which I didn't know that.
Really? I didn't know that either.
Mm-hmm. Which I think a lot of that comes from inner cities. And you'd think University of Illinois would be spectacular,
Right.
but Lovey obviously can't recruit inside Chicago for some reason. But yeah, Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois for professional athletes, I think.
Well, I think once they graduate from high school, they leave. It's too cold there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those players end up, especially Chicago and Washington D.C. A lot of them go to college in Ohio State, but then Georgia,
Florida,
Alabama. Yeah. So, and Will and I are both. We totally didn't even talking about this, but I would say we kind of fanboy more over coaches than we do players.
Absolutely.
I mean, Mike Ditka. I'm a big Illinois guy, so Ditka, Buddy Ryan, but then Nick Saban, Stoops.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I would think
in every sport.
I think you see certain coaches that
Dusty Baker.
Not Dusty Baker. Probably not Dusty Baker. But certain coaches that they kind of just create a style, and there's other coaches that learn from them, and they're just kind of icons.
Right.
And so but not Dusty Baker.
Well, and for background on me, I've coached boxing and wrestling, but my main sport is gymnastics, which is obviously not mainstream, and it's girl gymnastics, so female gymnastics, which people usually do that. They usually laugh, and I'm like, until you see a practice.
I think that I tell people this now because my background has been in football and baseball and things like that. But until I saw the very first workout that you guys did, I thought it was, just a walk in the park, and since then, that's probably the most difficult workout regimen I've ever seen in my entire life.
Well, what's funny is my trainer, my personal trainer, who owns the gym that I lift at, well, until this happened, but he came. I asked him to come out and take a look at my conditioning to see if there was any holes in it. Like he obviously has a kinesiology degree and everything else, and he's a really good trainer. I mean, I took kinesiology too. I can't name one muscle in the body besides a hamstring and a quad and a bicep. Like I memorized stuff right before the test and then forgot it. No, he knows like every detail, and he's very good. And he came in and watched a practice, and he watched him condition, and he was like, oh my Lord, I can't believe those little girls are that strong. And then it's funny because it morphed, because when he first got there, he said little girls. And then by the end, he's like, these athletes are amazing. They're and then he watched me spot and everything. And he's like, wow, you do a lot more than I thought you did.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. But for me, I mean, Texas is the upper echelon for almost every sport now.
Absolutely.
Even wrestling and hockey are getting there in this area.
Well, it was in the Stanley Cup. They had their first Plano raised kid.
Yeah.
Win the Stanley Cup in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
So it's coming everything. I think for a lot of reasons. One being just the fact that we've got so many people in the area, and the weather's great, so you can play sports year round. And
yeah,
a lot of people have a lot of money. So if you've got a lot of money, you
yeah,
can play a lot of sports.
Well, and I think that also lends itself to, we have a lot of retired athletes here too.
Absolutely.
And they add to the coaching. I know what made gymnastics great here was when Woga and Valeri Lukin moved here. It made everybody that much better. Because
Right.
first it was Houston, because it was Bella Caroli,
Right.
and then Woga moved in, and then you had all those great Olympians from them. But it made everybody step up their game,
Yeah.
because it was either step up your game or get left behind.
Right. 'Cause there's quite a few recent Olympian gymnastics, especially in the female side, that are from the area, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Simone Biles is from Houston,
Right.
and then the funny thing is, most people only know about the Olympians, but national team members, all that stuff. I mean, there's so many here. There's some from the East, a lot from California, but I would still say Texas is number one, like they are in most sports. It's
Right.
crazy.
But if they're going to come and train, they're typically come and train in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's certain gyms in the area that, well, the gym I'm at right now actually is what has been rated, I think 2 years ago, one of the number one programs in the country. But then you have Texas Dreams in Capel,
Okay.
which something like 65% of their athletes move from other states just to train there.
Yeah.
I mean, Woga was the same way.
Yeah.
But you have guys that. How about with football?
Right.
I mean, when we were in our young 20s, that was when that whole Salina thing went down. Wasn't that where they had people like.
Well, I can tell you personally, as far as Salina goes, I mean, Salina had a phenomenal program, and obviously their coach, G.A. Moore, he's a Texas Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But, I coached in Plano, Plano Senior High.
Yeah.
It has two schools, Plano East and Plano West as well. But, it was a smaller school, but they won multiple state championships. In fact, I think they're tied with a couple other schools with the most state championships. But
Yeah.
they have a reputation. We'll just leave it at that, because obviously I wasn't physically there. But I can tell you that it's pretty well known that they would go and go to some of the larger schools and say, hey, you can always go and play at the JV level or the freshman level, or you can come out here and start as a freshman or a sophomore. And there was a couple of state championships that half their starting offensive line, I taught elementary PE in Plano. And they just somehow miraculously
They ended up in Salina.
Yeah, just 30 minutes up
Yeah.
the road, but they didn't happen to live in Salina. They just had a PO box.
Yeah, it's crazy the lengths that, I mean, North Texas has been voted more than once the number one place to raise a youth athlete.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with the cheating that we were just talking
Right.
about, or alleged cheating.
Yeah.
But there's a competitiveness.
Oh yeah.
And this is what I can speak to, because I've coached in other states.
Mhm.
And I grew up in Illinois, where I was a wrestler, mainly a wrestler. I mean, I played football and stuff, but there was no. I think what the wrestling program is what you have here for everybody, for every sport, and that's grassroots that you have in North Texas. The only thing we had grassroots in Illinois was wrestling, because
Right.
that's what they prided themselves on. It was the same way in Minnesota. But I've coached in Illinois, Minnesota, and Mississippi. I've coached gymnastics. From day one, the acceptance of mediocrity
Oh yeah.
in those states compared to here, where there's just no accepting mediocrity here. People are just like, no, we have to do better. My son's baseball team,
Yeah.
he's 8 years old. It was coach's pitch. Okay. So he's 8 now. He was 7. They won the championship 2 years ago, went undefeated. They were pretty much undefeated last year. And then with COVID and everything,
Yeah.
a select team just moved into the McKinney League,
Mhm.
or I can't remember what league he's in, and just moved in
Right.
this select league. And it looked like adults playing with
Yeah.
7-year-olds. I mean, at the first game, I think we were down 16-3, and we had won every game like 16-4.
Right.
I mean, and we scored the most runs against them. Like, so we were still number one in the league if you took that select team out. And I mean, the other coaches were flipping out. They're like,
Yeah.
why is the select team allowed to do this? And they were a select travel team, and there were 7.
That's insane.
They practiced 5 days a week. Like, if they didn't have games, they practiced. I'm like, there's 7. Because they asked my son to be on the gym I used to be at. They asked him to be on the team there,
Right.
gymnastics team. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to make him choose, because he loves baseball.
Right.
And I don't if he did he wanted to be on the gymnastics team, but he wouldn't be able to do baseball because it's 4 nights a week, and it's gymnastics. I think more than any other sport starts really early. Even boys start a little later, but they still have a lot of time dedicated to it because his baseball team still only practices once a week.
Okay.
So luckily we have spectacular coaches. I actually had him on my other podcast, one of the coaches, and he's unbelievable human being, and he's a great coach. But and there it is. That's a city program.
Mm-hmm.
My kid's 7 years old, and his coach played in college and is an unbelievable drills for skills kind of guy.
Right.
And he's got these kids just smashing the ball. I mean, they pretty much picked one thing they were going to do well, and we were going to start with batting.
Right.
And they're at that age, that's where you need to start.
Sure.
And that's where they started. And the only team that could really out hit them was that select team.
Yeah.
And they did lose to another team that at the beginning of the season we had beat like 16-1.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they had all these different kids on their team by the end of the season. Turns out one of the coaches worked at an establishment.
Surprise.
It was DBAT. And brought in all these other kids, and all of a sudden they were awesome.
They had facial hair.
Yeah. They had their birth certificate, I am 7, I7.
Yeah.
Written in crayon.
Yeah, exactly.
They're drinking on the mound. Just leaving us to come up with a bench warmers reference.
Exactly.
But even there, it's so and they're undefeated this year too,
Sure.
and they just went to kid pitch, which is painful to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And my son's terrified of getting hit by the ball. Right. Terrified. And he'll just as soon as that kid comes up to pitch, my son's like, okay,
2 steps back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So which is normal, but it's just amazing the level of coaching. And we just lucked into this team.
Right.
But the level of coaching, when I go to their practices, I've only been once or twice, but it's stations, it's drills, it's from here to here to here to here.
Oh, yeah.
This is what you're doing. This is how it is. And it's organized. And they're really positive, awesome coaches.
Right.
But they still keep that level of discipline, and they just keep it moving. And I'm like, these guys are 7. And they're getting invaluable coaching at 7.
It looks like a spring training camp.
Right.
Yeah.
You go to an Illinois Little League practice. Mm-hmm. It's kids running around.
Kids
they're
out in the outfield chasing butterflies.
Yeah, chasing and picking dandelions and chasing each other with the baseball bat, trying to hit them.
Right.
And the coach is like, "Hey, get back over here! Get back over here!" It's just, I don't know why the culture in North Texas just lends itself to that, and it's at every sport.
Absolutely, I think it kind of comes down to the state identity, because we always think of Texas as this almost, we kind of isolate ourselves as here's the other 49 states.
Yeah.
And here's Texas.
Right.
And every town in Texas wants to think that they're the best town in Texas.
That's true.
This, especially, like, it's funny. Just the other day, we were talking with one of our sons about Prosper.
Yeah.
Prosper's now, what, 40, 50,000 people.
Yeah, and it's a gorgeous city.
Absolutely. It's growing. It's beautiful. The
amenities. Yeah.
When I was in high school, Prosper was the same
cornfield.
size. Yeah, it was 1,000 people. Just like the town I grew up in, Blue Ridge, 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have the same attitude about this little 1,000 people town.
Yeah.
I hate Prosper. It is not even the same town.
Right.
And so Nikki's talking about, what do you think about Prosper? I hate it. I was like, it's not even the same place.
Yeah.
Because I have this cultural identity. It's like, they were our adversaries.
Yeah.
They were our enemy. And I can name 20 other towns
Yep.
that 25 years ago.
McKinney and Frisco.
Yeah. They were our rivals.
Yeah.
And so every town has that competitive nature that we're the best, they're the worst.
Right.
And where do you find the competition? In your sports.
Yeah.
That's the only place you can find out where can you weigh yourself about another town. Well, you can talk about businesses, you can talk about jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But where do you get to compete? You compete in sports.
Yeah,
So
it's
true. You've got to be the best at it. And
right.
You can't find out 5 years later. You can't find out 10 years later, because by that point in time, your kids probably aren't playing sports anymore. You got to find out with your kids playing right now.
Yeah.
They've got to be better right now. And if they can't, well, next year we've got to be better.
Well, and with the standardized testing in the state too,
Oh,
they
yeah.
all do that too.
Absolutely.
They're all like, "Oh, our standardized testing was better than so and so and so," and it's like you can't even Prosper, McKinney, Frisco, Plano. The school districts are unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Allen, it doesn't matter
They're
which
all
one you go
schools.
to. They're all phenomenal.
Yeah, and we're blue ribbon, but I'm an ultra blue ribbon. I'm sparkly blue ribbon.
Right. So then where do they break up that tie? Sports.
Absolutely.
Sports.
And so we have to be better. We have to have the biggest indoor facility. We have to have the biggest weight room. We have to
Yep.
have the coolest looking uniforms.
We have to have a $6 million
Yeah.
football facility.
It's like, Allen and McKinney's, and I'm a big proponent of this. I have no problem because obviously it's being paid for other ways, the revenue stream that it comes in. But you're seeing $50-60 million stadiums being built, and people lose their mind about it. But what is a $20 million stadium versus a $60 million stadium? What's that $40 million difference bring you? But we have to be the best.
You have one more whirlpool tub. That's it. That's
it.
Well, and it goes up every year. And who knows? Those stadiums, that might change now that COVID. I don't know.
I was gonna say,
who knows what's going to happen?
We actually went and played. My son, his freshman team, played Allen.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. And it's the first time I've ever actually been in the stadium.
Yeah.
My jaw hit the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is amazing.
And that's with a bad foundation.
Exactly. and my kid, we go to school in Frisco.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the 3 stadiums they get to play in. The first stadium they play in is the Star.
Yeah.
In Frisco.
Yeah.
Where the Cowboys work out.
We have meets there. Yeah.
The second stadium, the backup stadium, is Toyota Stadium.
Yeah.
The third stadium, if they're relegated, is Memorial Stadium, which is the renovated stadium.
Right.
Which is a phenomenal stadium.
Yeah.
But that's if you're if you're slumming it.
Right.
And so they play at 3 phenomenal stadiums, and here I am. I walked into the Allen Eagles Stadium. I'm like, this is phenomenal. This is great.
It's unbelievable.
And these are 16, 17, or 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And they're but obviously if they're walking and playing on a stadium, you've got if it's a regular season, you've got 25,000 people and they're screaming at you.
Yeah.
And you can't lose. That's not.
Yeah.
They've got signs for state championships and national championships.
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, how do you expect a 16 or 17-year-old kid to keep a normal head on their shoulders if that's your expectation?
Well, and what's crazy is it doesn't even start at that age. It starts earlier. My girls, my athletes. So we won the state championship last year,
right?
Which in Texas for gymnastics at a low level, it's called level 4. It's compulsory level. And any other state, they don't even pay. It's achievement usually. Everybody gets ribbons, and not in Texas, man. No. It's placement, baby. Yeah. And it's a big deal to win it, and we won it, and we beat a really good gym to win it. But one of my girls, we were at our nemesis gym, and she's competing, and she gets a 10-0 on bar. Which it was the first 10-0 of my career. I've always come close, but something always happened at the last. They took a little step or something happened, and I knew as soon as she threw the bar routine it was going to be a 10-0 because I could tell the way the judges were going and everything else. And it's such a coveted thing in gymnastics. And I'm sitting there, and she's facing me, and the scoreboard's behind her. And I knew they were going to post it. So as soon as they posted, the judges are looking at her because they're like, ooh, how's she going to react? And I go, hey, there's your score. Yeah. And she turns around and she looks, goes, uh-huh. And I go, aren't you excited? And she goes, that was the goal, wasn't it?
That's what I expected.
Yeah. I expected a 10.
Right.
Like, that's their mentality.
Yeah.
And I'm not that kind of coach. Like, I'm not like, it's 10 or nothing. You know, I'm more of I would call myself a player's coach.
Right.
I'm very do the best that they can do.
Right.
I don't care if it beats anybody. I don't care if you're last place, first, as long as you're better than you were yesterday. That's what I care about.
Right.
And so I was, and the judges were like, that's all we're going to get? Like the judges.
They were waiting for the pop and they never got it.
And even the crowd was kind of like, uh-huh. Because everybody knew when she threw the routine, it was a 10-0.
Yeah.
So, and they keep track. It's My Meet Scores Online or something like that. And they keep track of all the kids in the nation. And she was number 1 kid in the nation. And she was tied with like one other kid, I think. But I'm like, and it was just like, yeah. And I think on us as a team, vault, which is kind of what I would say my specialty is. We were ranked 16th in the nation, something like that, which is a big deal. Right. That's a lot of gyms.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And that's pre-COVID.
Wow.
This is before COVID hit because we didn't even finish our optional season. And the crazy thing is, even though I'm from Illinois and I was in Minnesota for a lot of years, which is talk about a state that is cloaked in mediocrity, especially when it comes to sports.
Yeah.
I almost think they think they're too intelligent for sports. And I know this goes off the topic I was just going to say, but here's my problem, and this is my problem with COVID right now.
Sure.
And everything else. There are kids that are poets and artists and musicians and geniuses.
Yeah.
But there are kids where sports is their life.
That's their thing.
That's their thing.
That's gonna be
And
their
it
thing.
shouldn't be any more discounted than someone being a poet or a
Absolutely.
writer, or this is what they do. And they recognize that in Texas.
Mhm.
They recognize, hey, you know, and those sports can get them medical degrees. It can
Absolutely.
get them all those other things that they want through scholarships and things like that.
Right.
But I think other states discount the importance of sports.
I think definitely that's a huge case, especially when you talk about that East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah.
When you get to that certain mindset that they're just jocks.
Yeah.
You know, when
Not intelligent.
absolutely.
Yeah.
When I ran my baseball academy, you know, or when I coached at Plano, unfortunately there were some parents that thought, you know, my kid's going to make it to the Major League Baseball or
Right.
play in the NFL. I have actually had some athletes that did play professional sports.
Mhm.
However, I had a large degree of athletes that had their college scholarships paid for by sports.
Right. Which is huge.
If you have a kid if you've ever had to write a tuition check,
Yeah.
and you see how much that bill is, if you can have a kiddo that gets a scholarship because of sports,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you not push
Right.
for that? Why would you not cheer for that? Why would
Right.
that not be a success story?
Right.
So why would you not push? I mean, why would you not be all for that?
Right.
But
Well,
yeah,
and you have to keep a certain academic level.
absolutely, they're pushed
to do
for-
that.
Yeah, the liberal arts kid, if he's failing, you know,
Yeah.
nobody's going to be concerned about that other than maybe his parents. That's it.
Right. Right.
The kiddo who's on an athletic scholarship, if he's not 2.0,
Yeah.
guess what? He's not playing.
Well,
And
why
he
do
doesn't get that scholarship.
University
she.
of Illinois? Why do they suck so bad? Because a lot of athletes can't get into that school. It's a top 5%
Yeah, I was
school,
gonna say, let
or I
alone
think it's
2.0.
2.5% now.
Yeah,
Like it's my wife graduated with a medical degree from University of Illinois.
right.
Her brother has 2 PhDs from the University of Illinois. I'm like, you guys are studs because
Yeah.
that's a school.
Right.
Like University of Texas, the same way.
Right.
You don't think their football program's hurting because they're above the top 10% now?
Absolutely.
It's hurting. There's kids that can't get in. Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
There's kids that can't get into that program. So there are plenty of unbelievably intelligent kids
Right.
that are great athletes. That stigma of, oh, they're a jock.
Right.
I'll tell you what. I guarantee I would put the grade point averages of my gymnasts
Oh,
up against anybody in the country.
Mhm.
Because I guarantee they're all 4.0.
Right. And I've had athletes, I've had kiddos that, okay, you know, they may not be great when it comes to, you know, writing a 10-page thesis paper.
Right.
But if I give them a 400-page playbook,
Yeah.
and they got to memorize, you know, routes, formations, and stuff like that,
Absolutely.
they can do it like that.
Right.
Because that's just the way their brain functions.
Well, and they care about it.
It doesn't say it engages them.
And that's that. If that engages them,
Right.
it's a positive thing.
Just because they couldn't read War and Peace didn't mean that they weren't smart.
Well, and they have the discipline that they could still get through War and Peace,
Right.
even if they don't quite get it.
Right.
They're going to get through it, and they're going to do the assignments that lead to it because they learn that discipline. And that's, I think, I mean, gymnastics, just for one, gymnastics has the highest graduation rate, the highest GPA, the lowest pregnancy rate of the female gymnast. I didn't look up the statistics on the male gymnast. What else? The lowest alcoholism, lowest drug use.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable because of the amount of discipline.
Well, I have no doubt you guys have them from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and not doing
Yes.
something. There's no
Well,
doubt.
I mentioned this. I did that on the trailer for Coach's Spot. Is a gymnast? I'm with them more than their parent
Yeah.
because not now. I'm in an afternoon program, but when I was in a homeschool program and I had gymnasts from 6:30 to 12:30,
Yeah.
and then they went to school,
Right.
and some of them came back. My elites came back.
Yeah.
So they'd come back and do another 2 to 3 hours, and they were still home by 6:30.
Right.
So they still got to have normal family dinners and things like that. But I had a parent come up to me and she's like, I had reservations because I didn't know you, you know?
Right.
And she's like, the Mohawk, the all that stuff. I wasn't sure. She goes, and then I got to know you. And she's like, and I was happy to let you be around my athlete for that many hours a day because I know you're also building a good human being.
Right.
And you got to be careful with that.
Well, there's
Because those 7-year-olds
Yeah.
are still doing 2 hours a night, and they're 7,
Yeah.
and they're doing at least 4 nights a week.
Well, you think about it, parents, because think about the time, you think about the monetary investment.
Yeah,
there has to be a severe level of trust when they allow
Absolutely.
their child.
And then you
looking
see
for
what
that.
they're doing,
Absolutely.
especially a gymnast.
Like I told you, I came to that one practice with you guys,
Yeah.
and it was just a warm up that you guys were going through, and I'm like, if I would throw up after the first 30 minutes, you know. And at that point in time, I thought I was in pretty good shape.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'm coaching, I'm teaching, I was working out in my level of workout,
Yeah.
and you guys are just getting ready.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
Yeah. You should see the program I'm in now. They finish their warm up and they're drenched,
Yeah.
like just sweat piling off of them.
Gassed.
And and that's just the warm up. We're just getting ready. And I'm a big proponent of that. I'm a big proponent in that they condition before they work out,
Yeah.
because I think it makes them better. And then when we get to a meet and they're like, oh, we didn't have to work out before we did this stuff's even easier. You know, I'm a big proponent of that. People, you know, and you know this from knowing me, my niche was, you might have more talented gymnasts than me,
Right.
but you're not going to be in better shape.
Oh,
than
you're not going
us.
to work.
Yeah.
No.
You're not going to put in what we put in.
No.
And when they're bound by that, those gymnasts, they learn to rely on each other because, oh, so and so is making it through, I can make it
Right.
through. And they learn that. And that was just my thing. I was like, I'm not getting beat because we weren't in good enough physical condition.
I think that's one of the things when we mentioned the coaches that, you know, we talk about Ditka, Saban, all those guys. I think that's one of the biggest proponents of all those coaches, is that when it came time to play, almost the game was easier than any practice that they ever had.
Yeah. Oh,
Because-
yeah.
Because there was like, man, the game was easy.
Well, especially like Buddy Ryan.
Oh, man.
He made Michael Singletary cry.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Michael Singletary.
you talk about coaches like that, and I mean, in today's day and age, you know, I don't if I want to say it was abuse or anything like that, but they knew their breaking point,
Yeah.
and in practice, and they did it as a team. It
Mhm.
didn't matter your background, your race, your last
Right.
name, where you came
No.
from. They came together as a team. He would push them to their breaking point. And I'm sure it's in every sport like that. You talk
Yeah.
about certain guys like Bella Crowley or whatever.
Bear Bryant.
Yeah, they pushed when they went down to Junction.
Yeah.
How many guys left Junction because they
Yeah.
couldn't do it? But the team that stayed pushed them to their absolute limits, found out what the limits were,
Yeah.
so that when it came time to go back and play, man, the game was a piece of cake.
Right. Right.
There was no problem with that.
And you know, especially everything going on in gymnastics right now, everything that's coming out, and
Yeah.
they're like, oh, they were abusive. Man, that's a thin line you're walking down.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee, I know that you and I
Yeah.
are not abusive
No,
coaches. I know that for a fact, but I also know that our players worked for us.
absolutely.
So, and they had to be pushed. I put a system together and I find out what my girls' goals are. I'm like, okay, here's the system.
Mhm.
If you want to be put in it, jump in, let's go. This is what you have to do to be successful.
Absolutely.
And guess what? If you don't want to be, don't put the work in.
Right.
But I'm going to be honest when your parents come to me and say, hey, why isn't she doing better than those other girls? I
Oh,
go,
yeah.
well, because she's not putting the work in.
Yeah.
I gave her, here's the system, put yourself in it, let's go.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of coaches are like that. They're like, okay, well, the door's right there.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd be bowing down. And we only got a few minutes left. I shouldn't jump into this. But Oklahoma State,
Yeah.
and wearing that OPN shirt?
Yes.
Or whatever.
OAN.
Yeah,
Yeah.
OAN, and then the players getting together and saying that it was racist and all this other stuff. Dude, I don't care if you're my best player.
Yeah.
Bye. See ya.
You don't have to be here.
You don't have to be here.
And there'll be
if you
somebody
think
else that
we're
can take your
racist,
place.
if you think we're racist, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had that experience, and I will be more than happy to sign your transfer papers to wherever you want to go.
I think obviously in this day and age,
And then they cut him $3 million.
I think the reality is the fact that in certain places there comes a point where the coach is not leading the team, the players are leading the team.
Yep.
I think that, and that comes to the point here in North Texas. I think one of the reasons it's so successful here is that most places the coach still leads the team.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that you see here.
Right.
Unfortunately, in places like that, and there's a reason that they overturn coaches pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Or they're maybe not as successful, is that the team leads, the players lead the team.
Yeah.
And you can't have
You can't have that.
You can't have a team.
You can't have that.
No.
I mean, and I think you hit it right on the head. I think this is still a place where people respect the coach.
Yeah.
I know there's plenty of times, you know, my wife plays softball.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of times she's yelling stuff at Finn. And I'm like, Finn's my son. And I'm like, he has coaches. Shut up. Like, he has people that teach him that.
Right.
Don't yell that.
Well, I'll tell you right now, like both my sons, I have a senior and a freshman.
Yeah.
And I've told them, hey, specific things as a previous high school coach. I don't agree with this,
Right.
but you listen to your coach.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
respect him.
It's
and,
his
and
system.
you do what they say.
It's his system. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's coaches in gymnastics that don't believe in conditioning. They believe that the workout itself is enough conditioning. And I'm like, I don't believe with that. But they have successful kids still. But I think they rely more on talent than they do on, I still think you can make a D player into a C plus or a B player
Sure.
just with conditioning, just with hard work. I've seen it in myself because I started working out again a few years ago, and I saw my physicality and my athleticism go up at 48 years old, 47 years old. And I was like, holy mackerel, that's better than when I was 30 something, And I was like, how did that happen? And it's just better training.
Right.
And I was unlucky. I had crappy coaches. I had terrible coaches my whole life. I didn't win my first sporting event. I mean, I won wrestling matches and stuff like that, but like major sporting event till I was 36 years old. I won a Golf Channel stroke play event, and I won it by a lot, and it was in Illinois.
Yeah.
And what was the difference between how I played that day? And I was playing in the same conditions as everybody else. It was a crappy day. It was rainy. Everybody else fell apart. I didn't fall apart because I learned to golf here in Texas, and I learned from good coaches.
Right.
And the only thing I thought that whole day was, what's my next shot? All these other guys are thinking about the conditions, and they're thinking that ball's all muddy. Do we get to lift clean in place? Do we get to? All I thought about was, what's my next shot?
Yeah. And
I won by like 13 strokes. And it was the first time I ever won anything. But it was also the first time my coaching had been here in Texas.
Yeah.
And even at that age, the difference is amazing.
Right.
Even at that age. I mean, they're still like, no, you're going to be competitive. Like, I'm going to make you better. Like, I had a golf coach yell at me and then apologize to me. He's like, you're a grown adult. I shouldn't. I go, no, I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm fine with that. Yeah. That's what I wanted.
If it makes me better.
I wanted that through my whole youth and never got it.
Right.
I never got that discipline. I was good enough to be on the team, but not good enough to pay attention to.
Right.
Because there they coach talent again instead of the athlete. Because I believe the talent comes and goes.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I've seen kids that are really talented at 7 years old, and then they kind of peter out. And then I've seen kids that don't hit their prime till 12.
Absolutely. You can't trust puberty. You can't trust your skill level because you may be super talented at 9, 10.
Yeah.
Guess what? When you're 16,
you're
not as talented anymore.
Yeah. And I've seen the exact opposite.
Oh,
Jonathan Horton, who's a spectacular gymnast, he didn't win his first meet till he was 16 years old. Olympics weren't anywhere in his future. And then all of a sudden, but it was work ethic.
Yeah.
And, he went to University of Oklahoma, and he went to the Olympics. He's spectacular. And he's that way in business now, too. But he didn't hit his prime. He's the first one to tell you, I didn't even win a meet. And it was a bad meet. Like, there was barely anybody there till I was 16 years old. And he just didn't hit his stride till then. And some kids are like that. Some kids don't hit their stride till after. Look at the guys that are walk-ons in the NFL and become stars.
Absolutely.
And they don't hit their prime till or mid-20s.
Exactly.
It happened today. I saw a few games today that it happened. So, I mean, it's just, I always parents always ask me, well, how good can they be?
Right.
I'm like, I'm not smart enough to tell you that. I have no idea. I can tell you I'm going to put the system in place to make them the best they can be.
Right.
And then we'll see where it goes from there, because I can't tell you, because I've seen girls that they walk in at 5 years old. I'm like, that kid's an elite.
Right.
And the kid walks in behind them, picking their nose and trips and falls and trips over their shoelaces. I'm like, that kid's going to barely make team. And that kid's the one that ends up being the elite.
Right.
I'm not smart enough. No. Because you don't know until you put them in the system.
When you're talking 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
How can you tell that?
Yeah, you can't. No. All the life and everything else. All you can do is give them the best coaching that you can possibly. And that's what I strive for every day when I coach. Right. Is just to be better than the people that coached me. Yeah. That's it. That's what drives me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know it didn't work.
Yeah, I know. So, but I guess that's a good place to end. I'm going to have you on again, man.
Absolutely.
Dude, if you could make it here every weekend, you'll be my co-host.
Say when.
Yeah, dude, you're more than welcome. I think this would be good. I think that was good. You kind of jumped around a little bit.
That's all right.
But I think to get the general idea what the show's about, which is North Texas and keeping North Texas as good as they are, we'll get into coaching systems next time.
Actually, what we want to talk
Specific,
about.
yeah. We'll get into specific coaching systems
All right.
because that would be interesting. I think it would be to look at some of the bigger coaches and what they do. And oh man, we'll talk about how bad college looks right now.
Oh my gosh, we can spend a full 30 minutes on that.
Yeah, easily. So thanks for coming by.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks everybody for listening to Coach's Spot. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye. It's still taping. Don't say anything.